Deep in the mountains of Colorado, behind walls of concrete and steel, sits a prison unlike any other. They call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Inside one of its most guarded cells lives a man who was once considered the most dangerous criminal in the world. His name is Joaquín Guzmán Lora, but the world knows him as El Chapo, which means shorty in Spanish. For decades he ran the Sinaloa Cartel, one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations on earth. His network smuggled cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine worth billions of dollars into the United States. He was responsible for violence that claimed thousands of lives across Mexico and beyond. In 2019, a jury in New York found him guilty of running a criminal enterprise, drug trafficking, money laundering, and using weapons. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, plus 30 years. There would be no parole, no second chances. El Chapo was sent to a place designed to hold men who must never escape, never cause trouble, and never see freedom again. That place is called ADX Florence. If you want to discover what happens when the world's most infamous criminals disappear behind America's most secure walls, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about this case. But here's what most people don't know. Even though El Chapo is locked away in the most secure prison in America, his story didn't end when those heavy doors slammed shut. In fact, what's happening to him right now might be even stranger than his life on the run. And the question everyone asks is this: what does life look like for a man who escaped from maximum security prisons twice before, now trapped in a place designed so that escape is impossible? To understand that, we need to go back to the beginning. Joaquín Guzmán was born in 1957 in a poor mountain village in Sinaloa, Mexico. His family was so poor they lived in a house with dirt floors. His father was harsh and sometimes violent. Young Joaquín had to work in the fields growing oranges and corn just to help his family survive. He barely went to school. Life was hard and opportunities were few. But Sinaloa wasn't just any state. It was known as the birthplace of Mexico's drug trade. In these mountains, farmers had been growing marijuana and opium poppies for generations. For poor families like Joaquín's, the drug business seemed like the only way out of poverty. As a teenager, Joaquín started working for local drug traffickers. He was short, standing only about 5 feet 6 inches tall, which is how he got his nickname, Shorty. But what he lacked in height he made up for in ambition and ruthlessness. He learned the business quickly. By his 20s, he was running his own operations, moving drugs across the border into the United States. Over the years, Joaquín built relationships with other traffickers. He formed alliances, eliminated rivals, and slowly climbed the ladder of Mexico's underworld. By the 1990s, he had become one of the leaders of the Sinaloa Cartel. His organization controlled drug routes across Mexico and into the United States, making billions of dollars every year. But El Chapo was different from other drug lords. He didn't just use violence, though there was plenty of that. He was smart. He built tunnels under the U.S.-Mexico border to smuggle drugs. Some of these tunnels had rail systems, lighting, and ventilation. They were engineering marvels built for crime. He bribed police officers, politicians, and prison guards. He had an entire network of people protecting him, warning him when authorities got too close. For years he stayed one step ahead of the law. Then, in 1993, his luck seemed to run out. Mexican authorities arrested him in Guatemala and sent him to Punta Grande, a maximum security prison in Mexico. They thought they had finally caught the man who had become a legend in the criminal underworld. They were wrong. On January 19, 2001, something happened that shocked Mexico and the world. El Chapo escaped. According to the official story, he hid in a laundry cart and was wheeled right out of the prison. But many believe he simply walked out the front door, protected by guards he had bribed with millions of dollars. For the next 13 years, he was a ghost. The Mexican government searched for him. The American government offered rewards. But El Chapo had disappeared into the mountains of Sinaloa, protected by local villagers who saw him as a hero. While hiding, he continued to run his cartel, shipping drugs worth billions into the United States. The manhunt intensified. Mexican Marines, working with American intelligence agencies, tracked him across the country. In February 2014, they finally found him. El Chapo was captured in the beach resort town of Mazatlan, sleeping in a hotel room. This time they sent him to Altiplano, the most secure prison in Mexico. The government assured everyone that El Chapo would never escape again. They placed him under constant surveillance. They moved him between cells to keep him disoriented. They took every precaution imaginable. It wasn't enough. On July 11, 2015, guards checked his cell during evening rounds. El Chapo was gone, vanished. When investigators searched the cell, they found something that seemed impossible. In the floor of his shower, hidden behind a small wall, was a hole. It led down to a tunnel. This wasn't just any tunnel. It was a mile long, running from the prison to a small house in a nearby neighborhood. Inside the tunnel, there were lights, ventilation, and even a motorcycle modified to run on rails. Someone had spent months digging this tunnel, removing tons of dirt, installing equipment, all while El Chapo sat in his cell in Mexico's most secure prison. Drop a comment below and let us know. How do you think someone could build a mile-long tunnel under a maximum security prison without anyone noticing? The escape made headlines around the world. It embarrassed the Mexican government. It proved that El Chapo's power and wealth could reach anywhere, even into the heart of a maximum security prison. The message was clear. No Mexican prison could hold him. Mexican authorities launched the biggest manhunt in the country's history. They raided houses, questioned associates, and followed every lead. The Americans increased pressure, offering rewards and sharing intelligence. For months, El Chapo evaded capture once again, hiding in the mountains he knew so well. But this time would be different. On January 8, 2016, Mexican Marines surrounded a house in the town of Los Mochis. A gun battle erupted. El Chapo and his men fought back, but they were outnumbered. He tried to escape through a drainage tunnel, but authorities were waiting. After 6 months on the run, El Chapo was captured for the third and final time. Now the Mexican government faced a serious problem. They had caught the world's most wanted drug lord twice before, and twice he had escaped. If they kept him in Mexico, he might escape again. The embarrassment, the danger, the corruption, it was too much to risk. So they made a decision that changed everything. They would send him to the one country with prisons he couldn't bribe his way out of, couldn't tunnel out of, couldn't walk out of. On January 19, 2017, exactly 16 years after his first escape, El Chapo was put on a plane and flown to the United States. He landed in New York to face charges that would put him away forever. The trial began in November 2018 and lasted 3 months. Prosecutors presented evidence of murder, torture, kidnapping, and drug trafficking on an unimaginable scale. Witnesses testified about the violence, the corruption, and the billions of dollars in illegal profits. El Chapo's lawyers argued that he was being blamed for crimes committed by others, that the real leader of the Sinaloa Cartel was someone else. They claimed he was just a scapegoat. The jury didn't believe them. On February 12, 2019, they found El Chapo guilty on all 10 counts. When the judge sentenced him to life in prison plus 30 years, El Chapo complained about the conditions of his detention in New York. He said he had been tortured by being kept in isolation. He called it cruel and inhumane. The judge was unmoved. On July 17, 2019, El Chapo was transferred to his final destination. He was flown to Colorado, driven to a prison hidden in the desert mountains, and locked inside a cell in the most secure prison in the United States. ADX Florence is not like other prisons. Built in 1994, it was designed to hold the most dangerous criminals and American terrorists, gang leaders, spies, and serial killers. The facility is sometimes called a clean version of hell. Every aspect of the prison is designed to prevent escape, prevent violence, and prevent any form of communication with the outside world. The prison sits on 37 acres of land surrounded by razor wire fences, pressure pads, and motion detectors. Guard towers watch every angle. Inside, the concrete walls are reinforced with steel. The doors are controlled remotely. There are 1,400 electronically controlled gates throughout the facility. Cameras watch everything, everywhere, all the time. Every movement is monitored. Every conversation is recorded. There are no blind spots, no moments of privacy, no chances to plan anything without being observed. ADX Florence holds about 400 inmates. Many are serving life sentences. Some are former leaders of terrorist organizations. Others ran violent gangs or committed horrific crimes. They are locked away in what the federal government calls administrative maximum security, the highest level of security in the American prison system. But even within this ultra-secure facility, there is a special section, a section reserved for the most dangerous of the dangerous, a place where only a handful of inmates live under even stricter conditions than the rest. They call it Range 13. Some call it the Suites. This is where they put El Chapo. Range 13 contains only 4 cells in the entire massive prison complex. And in 2019, when El Chapo arrived, only 2 of those cells were occupied. That means in the most secure prison in America, in the most secure section of that prison, El Chapo shares space with only 1 other inmate. His neighbor is a man named James Sabatino, a convicted criminal who once impersonated music industry executives and defrauded people out of millions of dollars. The 2 men cannot see each other. They cannot talk to each other. They live in complete isolation, separated by thick concrete walls. What does El Chapo's cell look like? It's small, very small, about 12 feet long and 7 feet wide. That's smaller than many people's bathrooms. Inside this tiny space is everything he has: a concrete bed with a thin mattress, a concrete desk, a concrete stool, all built into the walls so they cannot be moved or used as weapons, a stainless steel toilet and sink combined into one unit, and a small shower. The walls are soundproof, designed to prevent communication with other inmates. There is one small window, but it doesn't show the outside world. Instead, it faces an empty concrete courtyard, designed so that inmates cannot see the mountains or the sky, or anything that might help them figure out where they are or plan an escape. The window is made of thick, reinforced glass. El Chapo cannot break it. He cannot reach through it. All he can see through that window is more concrete, more walls, more emptiness. His cell door is made of solid steel with a small slot for food trays. Guards slide his meals through this slot 3 times a day. He eats alone. He sleeps alone. He spends 23 hours every single day alone in this tiny concrete box. For 1 hour each day, he is allowed out of his cell. But he doesn't go to a recreation yard with other inmates. He doesn't get to talk to anyone or play games or feel normal for even a moment. Instead, guards escort him to another small concrete room, slightly larger than his cell, where he can exercise alone. This recreation room has nothing in it. No equipment, no weights, no basketball hoop. Just empty space surrounded by more concrete walls and more cameras. El Chapo can walk in circles. He can do push-ups or sit-ups. He can pace back and forth. Then, after 1 hour, he goes back to his cell. Every single day is exactly the same. But the isolation is only part of the punishment. The surveillance is constant and invasive. Cameras watch him every moment of every day. When he eats, when he exercises, when he uses the toilet, when he sleeps, everything is recorded. There is no privacy, no moment when he is not being observed. Guards check on him constantly. They walk past his cell at irregular intervals, so he can never predict when they will appear. They look through the slot in his door, making sure he hasn't tried anything, hasn't hidden anything, hasn't found some impossible way to start planning an escape. The lights in his cell never fully turn off. Even at night, there is always a dim light so cameras can see him. This makes sleep difficult. Many inmates in ADX Florence complain about sleep problems, about never being able to rest in complete darkness. about the constant hum of ventilation and the footsteps of guards echoing through the corridors. El Chapo's lawyers have filed complaints about these conditions. They say that keeping someone in complete isolation for years causes serious psychological damage. They argue that the conditions at ADX Florence amount to torture, that no human being should be treated this way no matter what crimes they committed. The prison officials disagree. They say these measures are necessary. They point out that El Chapo escaped from 2 maximum security prisons in Mexico. They argue that he has the money, the connections, and the willingness to try anything to get free. The extreme security isn't punishment, they say. It's prevention. And there's another reason they watch him so carefully. El Chapo still has power on the outside. His cartel didn't disappear when he was arrested. In fact, while he has been locked away in ADX Florence, the Sinaloa Cartel has continued operating, and much of it is now controlled by his own sons. El Chapo had multiple wives and many children. His most famous wife was Emma Coronel, a former beauty queen, who was much younger than him. They married when she was just a teenager. Together they had twin daughters in 2011. Emma stood by El Chapo throughout his trials and imprisonment. She attended his trial in New York every single day, sitting in the courtroom and listening to testimony about murders, drug shipments, and violence. Even when witnesses described her husband's crimes in horrific detail, she remained loyal. But Emma had her own secrets. In February 2021, she was arrested at Dulles International Airport in Virginia. American authorities charged her with helping her husband run his drug trafficking business. They said she had helped him communicate with cartel members while he was in prison in Mexico. They also accused her of helping plan his dramatic tunnel escape in 2015. Emma pleaded guilty. In November 2021, a judge sentenced her to 3 years in federal prison. She served her time and was released in September 2023. Now she is free, living somewhere in the United States, trying to rebuild her life while her husband sits in his cell in Colorado. Their twin daughters are now teenagers. According to prison rules at ADX Florence, El Chapo is allowed extremely limited contact with family. He can write letters, but every letter is read and censored by prison officials. He can receive letters, but again everything is screened. Phone calls are rare and strictly monitored. He is allowed to speak only with his 2 young daughters and his attorneys. That's it. No other family members, no friends, no associates. Every conversation is recorded. Every word is analyzed for any hint of coded messages or attempts to run his cartel from behind bars. His lawyers have said that El Chapo speaks with his daughters occasionally, but these conversations are painful. How do you talk to your children when you know you will never see them again? When you know they are growing up without you, and you are missing every important moment of their lives? Visits are even more restricted. Very few inmates at ADX Florence receive visits, and when they do, the visits happen in special rooms where inmates and visitors are separated by thick glass. They cannot touch. They cannot hug. They can only talk through phones while looking at each other through a barrier. El Chapo's daughters are allowed to visit, but it's unclear how often they actually make the trip to the remote prison in Colorado. The visits are short, heavily monitored, and emotionally devastating for everyone involved. Meanwhile, his sons have taken over much of the Sinaloa Cartel's operations. Ivan Archivaldo Guzmán and Jesus Alfredo Guzmán, 2 of his older sons, have become major players in the drug trafficking world. Together with their half-brothers, they formed a faction within the cartel known as Los Chapitos, the Little Chapos. Under their leadership, the cartel expanded into new markets. They began producing and smuggling massive quantities of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is 50 times stronger than heroin. This drug has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans in recent years, fueling an overdose crisis across the United States. The American government placed bounties on the heads of El Chapo's sons. Each of them has a reward of $10 million for information leading to their capture. The FBI and other agencies have made catching them a top priority. In January 2023, Mexican forces captured Ovidio Guzmán Lopez, another of El Chapo's sons, in a dramatic operation in Culiacan, Sinaloa. The arrest triggered intense gunfights between cartel members and security forces. Vehicles were set on fire, roads were blocked, and the city descended into chaos as cartel gunmen fought to free Ovidio. They failed. Ovidio was arrested and quickly extradited to the United States to face drug trafficking charges. Then, in September 2024, another of El Chapo's sons, Joaquín Guzmán Lopez, made a stunning decision. He surrendered to American authorities, bringing with him another major cartel leader, Ismael El Mayo Zambada. The circumstances of this surrender were bizarre and controversial. El Mayo claimed he was kidnapped and brought to the United States against his will. Joaquín's lawyers said he voluntarily turned himself in. Whatever the truth, both men are now in American custody, facing serious charges. What do you think? Did El Chapo's son betray his own cartel, or was something else going on? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This means that El Chapo now sits in his cell, knowing that two of his sons are in American prisons, possibly cooperating with authorities. Two others, Ivan and Jesus, remain fugitives with huge bounties on their heads. His empire, the organization he spent decades building, is being torn apart, and there is nothing he can do about it. Inside his cell at ADX Florence, El Chapo has reportedly struggled with the isolation. His lawyers have filed legal complaints saying that the conditions are destroying his mental and physical health. They claim he suffers from anxiety, depression, and memory problems. They say the complete isolation, the constant surveillance, and the lack of human contact are breaking him down. In court documents, his attorneys described him as deteriorating rapidly. They said he was losing his hearing and his vision. They claimed the harsh conditions were causing him to age faster than normal, that the man who was once known for his cunning and his ability to escape from anything was becoming a shell of his former self. Prison officials have not confirmed these claims. They say El Chapo receives adequate medical care and that his conditions, while strict, are lawful and necessary given his history. But lawyers who have visited him paint a different picture. They describe a man who seems confused, who struggles to remember things, who appears to be fading away in his concrete tomb. Some legal experts who study prison conditions say this is common among inmates held in long-term solitary confinement. The human brain needs social interaction. Without it, people can develop serious psychological problems. Studies have shown that prolonged isolation can cause hallucinations, panic attacks, and cognitive decline. Some inmates at ADX Florence have reported hearing voices or seeing things that aren't there. Others have harmed themselves out of desperation, unable to cope with the endless loneliness. El Chapo will spend the rest of his life in this environment. He is now in his late 60s. Even if he lives to be 90 or 100 years old, he will spend every single day in that small cell, alone, watched by cameras, cut off from almost all human contact. There will be no dramatic tunnel escape this time, no bribing guards, no walking out through the front door. The system is designed to prevent exactly that. ADX Florence has held some of the most dangerous and resourceful criminals in the world, and none of them have ever escaped. Some people say this is justice. They point to the thousands of people killed by the violence El Chapo's cartel caused. They think about the families destroyed by drug addiction, the communities terrorized by cartel violence, the corruption that poisoned entire governments. They believe that El Chapo deserves to spend the rest of his life in isolation, paying for the suffering he caused. Others argue that no matter what someone has done, keeping them in these conditions is inhumane. They say that complete isolation for decades is a form of torture that violates human dignity. They believe there must be a better way to punish even the worst criminals without destroying their minds and bodies. The debate continues. But while people argue about the ethics of ADX Florence, El Chapo remains in his cell. The days blend together. Wake up, eat breakfast alone, exercise for 1 hour in an empty room, return to the cell, Eat lunch alone, sit in silence, eat dinner alone. Try to sleep under the dim lights that never fully turn off. No visitors except his lawyers and occasionally his daughters. No phone calls except rare monitored conversations. No glimpse of the outside world except through a window that shows only concrete walls. This is his life now. This is his life forever. The man who was once one of the most powerful criminals on earth, who commanded armies of gunmen, who controlled billion-dollar drug routes, who escaped from maximum security prisons and embarrassed governments, that man is gone. In his place is an aging inmate in a tiny cell, watching his empire crumble from behind concrete walls, unable to do anything about it. El Chapo's story is a reminder that no matter how powerful someone becomes, no matter how much money they make or how many people they control, it can all disappear. The tunnels he built, the bribes he paid, the fear he inspired, none of it could save him from this fate. And perhaps that is the real punishment. Not just the isolation, not just the surveillance, but the helplessness. The knowledge that everything he built is falling apart, that his sons are being arrested or killed, that his legacy is turning to dust, and there is absolutely nothing he can do to stop it. In the mountains of Colorado, behind walls of steel and concrete, surrounded by cameras and guards and pressure sensors, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán sits in his cell. The world has moved on without him. The cartel continues without him. His family lives without him. And every day for the rest of his life will be exactly the same as the last. This is what happens when the most secure prison in America closes its doors on someone. This is what the end looks like for a man who thought he was untouchable. El Chapo's story is over. But in the tiny concrete cell in Range 13, in the prison called ADX Florence, he remains a living reminder that even the most powerful empires eventually fall, and some prisoners never escape.